He was the kind of man who never missed dinner with his kids, until one ordinary November night in 1975 when he vanished without a trace. 5 years later, in the rotting floorboards of an old outhouse on the edge of town, workers made a gruesome discovery that raised more questions than it answered. What really happened to Robert Harding, and why did no one see it coming? The early spring sunlight filtered through budding trees, casting dappled shadows across the abandoned Whitaker property on the outskirts of Maple Grove. Miguel Ramirez wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed the dilapidated farmhouse they'd been demolishing since dawn. The year was 1980, and Eastern Development Company had finally purchased the long-forgotten property to build modern homes for the growing community. "Hey, I need a bathroom break," Miguel called to his foreman, Joe Winters. "Gonna use that old outhouse over there." Joe glanced up from his clipboard, squinting at the weathered wooden structure that stood 20 yards from the main house. "Be careful with that thing. Looks like it might collapse if you sneeze too hard." Miguel chuckled, waving off the concern as he trudged across the overgrown yard. The outhouse leaned slightly, its wooden planks gray with age and exposure. As he approached, he noticed the door hanging precariously from a single, rusted hinge. The stench wasn't as bad as he'd expected. Years of abandonment had dried whatever had once festered inside. He pushed the creaking door open and stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air as the rotted wood gave way beneath him. Miguel's right leg plunged through the splintered boards, and he grabbed desperately at the walls to steady himself. "Shit!" he gasped, heart hammering as he pulled himself up. Breathing heavily, he reached for the small flashlight on his belt and pointed it down into the darkness below. The beam cut through the musty shadows, illuminating something that made his blood run cold. There, partially buried in years of accumulated waste and debris, was what appeared to be a human skull, its hollow eye sockets staring up at him in silent accusation. "Joe!" Miguel screamed, scrambling backward out of the outhouse, his voice carrying across the property. "Joe, come quick!" The foreman sprinted over, alerted by the panic in Miguel's voice. "What happened?" "You hurt?" "Look, down there!" Miguel pointed with a trembling hand, his face ashen. Joe peered cautiously through the broken floorboards, the color draining from his face. "Jesus Christ, get the sheriff. Now." Within 30 minutes, Sheriff Walt Grayson's patrol car kicked up dust as it bumped along the dirt access road to the Whitaker property. At 53, Grayson had served Maple Grove for nearly 2 decades, witnessing the town's triumphs and tragedies with the same watchful blue eyes, now creased with concern. Ducking under the yellow caution tape his deputy had already strung around the outhouse, Grayson knelt carefully by the damaged floor. His flashlight beam methodically swept the pit below, revealing what was unmistakably a human corpse in advanced stages of decomposition. The dry conditions of the sealed outhouse had partially mummified portions of the remains. "Get me a ladder," he ordered, his voice steady despite the grim discovery. Descending carefully into the pit, Grayson examined the scene with practiced precision. Beside the body lay a corroded wristwatch, its hands frozen at 5:17. In the coat pocket, he found a weathered leather wallet. Opening it, he extracted a driver's license, the plastic cloudy, but the name still legible, Robert Harding. Grayson's expression hardened with recognition. "So this is where you've been all this time?" If you enjoy fictional mysteries like this one, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Tonight we uncover the chilling truth about a father who vanished without a trace in 1975, and the shocking discovery that would haunt a small town forever. November 12, 1975. Maple Grove, a town where the changing seasons marked the rhythm of life more reliably than any clock. Robert Harding awoke before his alarm, as he did most mornings. At 37, his once athletic frame had softened slightly around the middle, but his movements retained the purposeful efficiency of a man who knew his place in the world. In the dim light of dawn, he watched his wife Linda sleeping beside him, her chestnut hair spread across the pillow. There was comfort in these quiet moments, but lately a growing unease had been gnawing at him, making even these peaceful interludes feel borrowed. "You're staring again," Linda murmured without opening her eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just admiring the view," Robert replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I'll start breakfast." "Just admiring the view," Robert replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I'll start breakfast." In the kitchen, he moved with practiced ease, brewing coffee and preparing lunches for the children. Caroline, 10, liked her sandwiches with the crusts removed. Nathan, 7, wouldn't eat anything unless it was cut into triangles. These small rituals anchored Robert, especially now when other parts of his life felt increasingly unstable. "Daddy!" Nathan's voice preceded the thunder of small feet on the stairs. The boy launched himself into Robert's arms, a tangle of pajamas and boundless energy. "Morning, champ!" Robert hoisted him up, marveling at how quickly he was growing. "Ready for your spelling test today?" Nathan's face scrunched in exaggerated dismay. "Can't you write me a note saying I've got a terrible disease?" "Nice try." Robert ruffled his son's hair as Caroline appeared, already dressed in her favorite blue jumper, her serious eyes a mirror of her father's. "Dad, can you help me with my science project tonight? It's due Friday," she asked, sliding onto a kitchen stool. "Absolutely, sweetheart." Robert slid a plate of toast toward her, ignoring the flicker of uncertainty that crossed his mind. Would he be able to keep that promise? Linda joined them, tying her robe as she entered. She moved to pour coffee, but Robert noticed her hand trembling slightly. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly as the children chattered. "Just tired," she answered, not meeting his eyes. "You were up late again last night?" He nodded, the familiar tension returning. "Just some work I needed to finish." "At the kitchen table? With the curtains drawn?" Her voice held a question she hadn't directly asked yet, but the implications hung in the air between them. Before Robert could respond, the cuckoo clock in the hallway chimed 7:30. "Gotta go," he said, grateful for the interruption. He kissed each of them goodbye, lingering a moment longer than usual with Linda. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Love you too," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Don't forget, Caroline's recital is tonight at 7. "Wouldn't miss it," Robert promised, grabbing his battered briefcase and thermal lunch container. The drive to Hawthorne Manufacturing took 12 minutes on a normal day. Robert's tan Chevy pickup was as much a part of him as his own hands, its dents and scratches a record of years of faithful service. As he drove, he passed landmarks that mapped his life in this town. Mason's Grocery, where he'd worked summers as a teenager, the Maple Grove First Baptist Church, where he and Linda had married, the elementary school where both his children now studied. Hawthorne Manufacturing sat on the eastern edge of town, its brick facade and smoking chimneys a monument to the industrial prosperity that had built Maple Grove. As the company's senior accountant, Robert held a position of respect, if not wealth. His office, a glass-walled cubicle overlooking the factory floor, afforded him both privacy and a constant reminder of the lives dependent on the company's success. "Morning, Bob," Frank Weber called from the maintenance office as Robert walked through the factory floor. Frank, burly and perpetually smudged with machine oil, had been Robert's friend since high school. "Morning, Frank. Kids good?" "Driving me crazy as usual," Frank grinned. "Sarah says you all should come over Sunday. Been too long." Robert nodded, though a shadow crossed his face. "I'll check with Linda. Things have been busy." In the accounting department, he exchanged pleasantries with the receptionist and settled at his desk, methodically arranging his files for the day ahead. Through the glass partition, he could see Diane Phillips, the office manager, watching him. 40, unmarried, with perfectly styled blonde hair, Diane had made her interest in Robert clear, despite his obvious commitment to his family. Robert. Victor Townsend's voice interrupted his thoughts. The factory owner stood in the doorway, imposing even at 65. His silver hair and tailored suits projected an authority that his political connections reinforced. "I need the third quarter projections by end of day." "They're almost ready, Mr. Townsend," Robert responded, noting the unusual tension in the older man's jaw, "just reconciling some discrepancies in the overseas account." Townsend's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Nothing serious, I hope?" "Just dotting I's and crossing T's," Robert answered carefully. After Townsend left, Robert unlocked his bottom drawer and extracted a leather-bound ledger not included in the company's official records. For weeks, he'd been tracking anomalies in the financial statements, shipments that disappeared from inventory without corresponding sales, payments to shell companies, unexplained transfers to offshore accounts. The pattern suggested embezzlement on a scale that threatened not just the company, but the livelihoods of everyone in Maple Grove. His desk phone rang, startling him from his calculations. "Accounting, Harding speaking." "Mr. Harding." The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a clipped precision that suggested education. "I believe we have a mutual interest in Hawthorne's financial irregularities." Robert felt his pulse quicken. "Who is this?" "Someone who can help. Roadside diner, 5:30 today. Come alone." The line went dead. Robert stared at the receiver, torn between hope and apprehension. Someone else knew. This could be the ally he needed, or a trap. At lunch, he found Frank in the employee break room and pulled him aside. "Frank, I need to talk to you about something," Robert began, voice low. "I've found something in the books that doesn't add up. Big discrepancies? Money disappearing." Frank's normally jovial expression sobered. "You sure about this, Bob? That's dangerous territory. I'm sure. Nearly $2 million over the past 3 years. Someone's draining the company dry." "Christ," Frank whispered. "You tell anyone else?" "Not yet. But I got a call. Someone wants to meet. Says they know about it too." Frank gripped Robert's shoulder. "Be careful, man. People with that kind of money don't like getting caught with their hand in the till." The afternoon dragged as Robert finished his regular duties, his mind preoccupied with the upcoming meeting. At 5:15, he gathered his papers, slipping the most incriminating evidence into his briefcase. Looking nervously over his shoulder, he made his way through the now quiet factory floor to the parking lot. The November sky had already darkened to deep indigo, the air sharp with the promise of frost. As Robert approached his truck, he didn't notice the dark sedan parked at the far end of the lot or the figure watching his every move. What would you do if you discovered something dangerous at your workplace? Would you speak up or stay silent? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Linda Harding glanced at the kitchen clock for the third time in 15 minutes. 7:30 p.m. Robert was never late without calling. She'd already phoned his office twice, getting only the night janitor who confirmed the accounting department was empty. "Mom?" Caroline stood in the doorway, already dressed in her recital outfit, a simple blue dress with white collar. "Is Dad coming?" "He's just running a little late, honey," Linda assured her, forcing a smile. "Why don't you practice one more time while we wait?" As Caroline reluctantly returned to the living room, Linda tried to quell the growing anxiety in her chest. This wasn't like Robert. Even when work kept him late, he always called, always made it home for dinner, always kept his promises to the children. By 8:15, after Caroline's tears had subsided and both children were settled in front of the television with reheated dinner plates, Linda's concern had hardened into fear. She grabbed her car keys and coat. "Mrs. Peterson," she called to their elderly neighbor who had come over to help. "I'm going to check the factory. Can you stay with the kids?" "Of course, dear. I'm sure he's just working late." Linda didn't bother responding. Both women knew Robert would never miss Caroline's recital without explanation. The drive to Hawthorne Manufacturing seemed interminable. When she finally turned into the factory parking lot, her headlights swept across Robert's tan Chevy pickup, parked awkwardly near the entrance, as if he'd been in a hurry. Relief flooded her momentarily until she realized the driver's door stood slightly ajar, the interior light casting a dim glow in the darkness. Linda parked beside it and approached cautiously. "Robert?" she called, her voice sounding thin in the empty lot. The truck's engine was cold, suggesting it had been sitting for hours. Inside, Robert's thermos rested in the cup holder, half full of now cold coffee. His lunch pail sat on the passenger seat, but the briefcase he carried every day was nowhere to be seen. Fighting rising panic, Linda hurried to the factory entrance and pounded on the glass doors. The night watchman, startled from his newspaper, came to investigate. "Mrs. Harding, what's wrong?" "My husband's truck is here, but I can't find him. Have you seen him?" The watchman's frown deepened. "No, ma'am. I've been on since 6 and I haven't seen Mr. Harding at all." Linda returned to the truck, examining it more carefully. Nothing seemed obviously wrong. No signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing to suggest foul play. Yet the open door, the missing briefcase, the abandoned vehicle, all pointed to something deeply wrong. With trembling hands, she walked to the nearest payphone and dialed the sheriff's office. "This is Linda Harding. My husband Robert is missing." Sheriff Walt Grayson was technically off duty when the call came in, but in a town Maple Grove size, a missing person, especially someone as well regarded as Robert Harding, warranted immediate attention. At 48, Grayson was still a deputy then, serving under Sheriff Malone, but he took the lead on the call. By the time he arrived at the factory, Linda had been joined by Frank Weber, who had rushed over after receiving her frantic call from a payphone. "Mrs. Harding," Grayson greeted her, his notebook already open. "Tell me exactly what you know." Linda recounted the evening's events, her voice growing steadier as she focused on the facts. Grayson examined the truck methodically, noting the position, the open door, the personal items left behind. "And the briefcase? You're sure it's missing?" he confirmed, shining his flashlight around the vehicle's interior. "Positive. He takes it everywhere, especially lately. Said he had important papers in it." Grayson's flashlight beam caught something in the mud beside the driver's side door, a partial footprint, larger than Robert's size 9 shoes would make. "Frank, when did you last see Robert?" Grayson asked the maintenance man, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. "Around 4:30. He seemed preoccupied. Said he had a meeting, but didn't say with who." "A meeting? After hours?" Linda looked surprised. "He didn't mention anything to me." Grayson made notes, his experienced eyes sweeping the area for additional clues. "Let's get some lights out here," he decided, "and I want to check inside the factory too." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of search parties, interviews, and growing desperation. Sheriff Malone authorized an official missing person investigation, bringing in officers from neighboring counties to help comb the woods surrounding the factory. In the harsh light of the sheriff's office, Grayson interviewed Robert's co-workers one by one. Frank Weber sat uncomfortably in the straight-back chair, his large hands fidgeting with his cap. "Tell me again about these financial discrepancies Robert mentioned," Grayson pressed. Frank shifted uneasily. He didn't go into details, just said he'd found something that didn't add up, large sums missing, said he had proof in his briefcase. And he didn't say who he was meeting that evening, numbered just that someone had called, said they knew about the money problems too. Diane Phillips proved a more reluctant witness. With perfect makeup that didn't quite hide the redness around her eyes, she perched on the edge of her chair like a bird ready to flee. "Ms. Phillips, would you describe your relationship with Robert as purely professional?" Her laugh held no humor. "You've been talking to the secretarial pool, I see. Just answer the question, please." She sighed, smoothing her skirt. "I admired Robert. Is a good man, kind, intelligent, honest to a fault. A pause. Yes, I was interested in him. He made it very clear he wasn't available. How did you feel about that? Her eyes flashed. Disappointed, obviously. But I'm not some fatal attraction case, Deputy. I respected his decision. Did Robert mention any concerns about the company finances to you? No, she answered too quickly, then amended. Well, he did seem concerned about some accounts lately. Spent a lot of time reviewing the overseas ledgers. Victor Townsend proved the most difficult interview. He arrived at the sheriff's office flanked by his attorney, a pinch-faced man from the county seat who interrupted frequently with objections as if they were in court. Mr. Townsend, when did you last speak with Robert Harding? Grayson asked, undeterred by the lawyer's presence. Wednesday afternoon? About the quarterly projections, Townsend replied, his voice carrying the confidence of a man accustomed to authority. Robert seemed perfectly normal. Were you aware of any concerns he had about the company finances? The lawyer leaned forward. My client is not obligated to discuss proprietary business matters. Townsend waved him off. It's fine, Charles. No, Deputy Grayson, I wasn't aware of any concerns. Robert was a valued employee, but he wasn't privy to all aspects of our financial operations. And where were you Wednesday evening between 5 and 9 p.m.? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Am I a suspect, Deputy? Just establishing a timeline, sir. I was at home, alone unfortunately, as my wife is visiting her sister in Cleveland. 3 days after Robert's disappearance, a search party found his torn jacket caught on brambles near Parsons Creek, about a half-mile from the factory. The discovery reinvigorated the search, but yielded no further clues. A week passed, then 2. Anonymous tips led Grayson to the roadside diner, where a waitress remembered Robert arguing with a well-dressed stranger the evening he vanished. They wasn't exactly arguing, Doris Mitchell clarified, refilling Grayson's coffee cup. More like having an intense conversation. The fancy man, suit probably cost more than I make in a month. He kept saying, "It's bigger than you think, and you don't know who you're dealing with." Could you identify this man if you saw him again? Doris shook her head. He kept his hat on, sat with his back to the counter. All I can tell you is he was tall, well-dressed, and had a voice like one of them radio announcers. Without a body, without witnesses to an actual crime, the investigation stalled. 3 theories emerged. Robert had voluntarily disappeared, perhaps running from the pressure of his discoveries. He had been kidnapped, possibly by someone connected to the financial irregularities, or he had been murdered, his body hidden somewhere in the vast woods surrounding Maple Grove. Linda vehemently rejected the first theory. Robert would never abandon us, she insisted to Grayson during one of his regular visits to update her. He loved his children more than anything. Something happened to him. After 3 weeks, Sheriff Malone reluctantly scaled back the investigation. We'll keep the case open, he assured Linda, but without new leads. Deputy Grayson continued following threads in his off hours, particularly intrigued by Victor Townsend's potential involvement. In his personal journal, he noted, Townsend's alibi remains unverified. Financial motive plausible if R.H. discovered embezzlement. Need more evidence. But evidence remained elusive, and as November gave way to December, the mystery of Robert Harding's disappearance settled over Maple Grove like the first heavy snow, a blank whiteness that obscured the landscape beneath. What do you think happened to Robert? Was he running from something, or was someone running from him? Let us know your theories in the comments. November 1976, 1 year since Robert Harding had vanished. The anniversary brought renewed media attention, but no fresh leads. For Linda, now working as a waitress at Jensen's Diner to support her family, the spotlight only reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Mrs. Harding, do you believe your husband is still alive? A reporter from the county newspaper asked as she cleared tables after the lunch rush. Linda's hands stilled on the plates she was stacking. "I believe," she said carefully, "that until I'm shown evidence to the contrary, there's hope." But hope was an increasingly heavy burden to carry. The practical realities of single parenthood consumed her days, paying bills with her meager salary, helping with homework, attending parent-teacher conferences where Caroline's teachers expressed concern about her withdrawal from friends and Nathan's growing behavioral problems. "He hit Tommy Miller during recess," Nathan's teacher explained during one such meeting. When asked why, he said Tommy called his dad a runaway. Linda's heart broke anew. "He's struggling to understand. We all are." At home, the changes were even more apparent. Caroline, once vibrant and talkative, spent hours alone in her room, producing increasingly disturbing artwork, shadowy figures watching houses, faceless men in dark coats, empty chairs at dinner tables. "It's just how I feel it," she explained, when Linda questioned a particularly bleak drawing of a man disappearing into a black void. Like Dad was just erased. One rainy afternoon, while searching the garage for Nathan's outgrown winter clothes to hand down, Linda discovered Robert's old fishing tackle box pushed to the back of a shelf. Inside, nestled among lures and fishing line, she found a small silver key she didn't recognize. It didn't fit any lock in their house, nor the safe deposit box they'd maintained at Maple Grove Savings and Loan. The discovery nagged at her, another small mystery in the larger enigma of Robert's disappearance. She showed it to Deputy Grayson during one of his regular check-ins. "Doesn't look like a house key," he observed, turning it over in his palm. "Safety deposit box, maybe? But not from any bank in town. They use different types." Could it be for something at work, Linda wondered? Worth checking? I'll ask around at Hawthorne. The community's reaction to the Harding family had shifted subtly over the year. The initial outpouring of support, casseroles, offers of childcare, prayer circles, had gradually dwindled, not from cruelty, but from the inevitable forward momentum of life. People still asked after Linda and the children, still expressed hope for answers, but their lives had returned to normal while the Hardings remained suspended in grief. Whispers followed Linda at the grocery store, at church, at school functions. Some still speculated about Robert running off with another woman, perhaps the mysterious blonde from out of town someone's cousin had seen him with, though no one could ever confirm when or where. Others suggested more sinister scenarios involving gambling debts or criminal connections, despite Robert's spotless reputation. Frank Weber remained a steadfast ally, convinced of foul play. Bob would never just leave, he insisted over coffee with Linda one Sunday afternoon. "And I've been doing some digging on my own." "What kind of digging?" Linda asked, keeping her voice low so the children wouldn't overhear from the living room where they were playing with Frank's kids. "About those financial problems he mentioned. I can't access the books, but I've been watching Townsend. Something's not right there. 3 of our quality control guys quit within months of Robert disappearing. All of them worked with shipping manifests." Linda leaned forward. "You think it's connected?" "I think," Frank said carefully, "that Robert found something Townsend didn't want found." The next day, Linda visited the Maple Grove Savings and Loan, hoping the bank manager might have insights about Robert's financial activities before his disappearance. Mr. Peterson, who had known the Hardings for years, initially hesitated to discuss a customer's accounts, even with his wife. "Mrs. Harding, you understand there are privacy regulations." "Please," Linda pressed. "I'm not asking for anything improper. I just need to know if Robert was worried about something, if there were unusual transactions." Peterson's expression softened. "Well, there was one thing. In the months before he disappeared, Robert made several small deposits to a separate account, one you weren't listed on." Linda felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. A secret account? Not large amounts, 200 here, 300 there, about 5,000 total. Did he withdraw it before he disappeared? Peterson checked his records. The money's still there. This was his contingency fund, Peterson explained further. He told me he was setting it aside in case he needed to protect his family quickly. He mentioned being concerned about retaliation if certain business irregularities came to light. He wanted funds you could access if something happened to him, but kept separate to avoid attention. The revelation brought Linda both pain and comfort. Pain that Robert had carried such fears alone. Comfort that he had been thinking of their protection, even as danger closed in. Meanwhile, Deputy Grayson had been quietly connecting dots between Robert's disappearance and financial irregularities at the factory. Public records showed Hawthorne Manufacturing was thriving under Townsend's leadership, with major expansions planned. Yet something about the timing troubled him. 3 employees quitting shortly after Robert vanished. Diane Phillips, suddenly promoted to financial controller, now openly dating Victor Townsend despite their 20-year age difference. The way Townsend had begun campaigning for county commissioner, spreading money liberally throughout the community. When Frank Weber confronted Townsend at the Rusty Nail, the town's most popular bar, tensions finally boiled over publicly. "Must be nice," Frank said loudly, as Townsend ordered another round for his political supporters. "Spending all that money that's supposed to be keeping the factory running." The bar fell silent. Townsend turned slowly, his expression dangerous. "You're drunk, Weber." "Not drunk enough to forget what happened to Bob Harding when he started asking questions about the books." Townsend's face flushed dark red. "Get out before I have you thrown out." "What are you hiding, Townsend? Where's all that money really going? Where's Bob?" 2 of Townsend's companions stepped forward, but the factory owner raised a hand to stop them. "You're fired, Weber. Don't bother coming in tomorrow." The next morning, Linda found an envelope slipped under her front door. Inside was a single typewritten note. "Check the ledgers. R found something." The years passed. Seasons changed. Caroline entered high school, her childhood cheer permanently dimmed, but adapting to life's new normal. Nathan continued struggling, his anger at his father's absence manifesting in academic problems and defiance. Linda kept the silver key in her jewelry box, a talisman of unanswered questions. And Deputy Grayson, now approaching retirement age, kept the Harding file open on his desk, returning to it whenever official duties allowed. If you're captivated by mysteries like this one, be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Spring 1980. The morning air carried the scent of new growth and possibility as a bulldozer rumbled to life on the abandoned Whitaker property. Eastern Development Company had purchased the 15-acre parcel with plans for a modest subdivision, Whitaker Estates, though nothing about the overgrown farmland suggested estates of any kind. Miguel Ramirez's discovery in the outhouse transformed a routine demolition into a crime scene. Sheriff Walt Grayson, who had succeeded Malone 3 years earlier, found himself facing the resurrection of a case that had haunted him for half a decade. The forensics team worked methodically, photographing and documenting the scene before carefully extracting the remains. Dr. Eleanor Thompson, the county medical examiner, supervised the recovery personally. "The conditions in there created a microenvironment," she explained to Grayson as they watched the technicians work. "Sealed, relatively dry despite being an outhouse, the waste actually helped preserve certain tissues through adipocere formation." In English, Doc? "The body's been partially mummified, and based on the clothing and personal effects, I'd say this is almost certainly your missing accountant." Laboratory analysis confirmed what Grayson already knew in his gut. The remains were indeed Robert Harding's. Dental records provided the official identification, while the cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the skull. "Single blow to the back of the head," Dr. Thompson indicated on the skull, consistent with a heavy, rounded object, maybe a pipe or tire iron. Death would have been rapid, possibly instantaneous. Grayson nodded grimly. So he was murdered. Without question. and based on insect activity and decomposition patterns, I'd estimate he was killed very close to when he disappeared. The task of notifying Linda fell to Grayson. He found her at home, grading papers from her recent job as a teacher's aide at the elementary school. At 42, Linda had aged gracefully despite her hardships. The uncertainty had etched fine lines around her eyes, but her posture remained straight, her manner composed. Until Grayson spoke the words she had both dreaded and expected for 5 years. "We found him, Linda." Her knees buckled, and Grayson guided her to the sofa. "Where?" she managed, her voice barely audible. "An old outhouse on the Whitaker property. Workers found him during demolition." "Was he—" She couldn't finish the question. "He was murdered, Linda. A blow to the head. It would have been quick." She nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. After a moment she asked, "Have you told the children?" "Not yet. I thought you might want to do that." Caroline, now 15, received the news with the quiet resignation of someone who had already mourned. But something in the confirmation seemed to awaken a determination in her. "Who did it?" she demanded, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Who killed Dad?" Nathan, at 12, responded with the fury that had been building since his father vanished. He smashed his fist into the wall, leaving a hole in the drywall that mirrored the one in their lives. "I hate him," he screamed, tears and rage making his face almost unrecognizable. "I hate him for leaving, for dying, for not being here." Linda held him as he collapsed into sobs, his anger finally giving way to the grief he'd been suppressing for 5 years. At the crime scene, Grayson's team made a crucial discovery. In the victim's pocket was a small, waterproof metal case, the kind photographers use to protect film. Inside, protected from the elements, was a microfilm containing photographed pages of ledgers. Though partially damaged, laboratory analysis revealed clear evidence of financial misconduct, offshore accounts, and most crucially, Victor Townsend's signature on unauthorized transfers to the Cayman Islands. "Smart man," Grayson said, examining the microfilm. He knew paper wouldn't survive if something happened to him. This is what he was protecting. Forensic evidence suggested Robert had been killed elsewhere and his body transported to the outhouse. Trace evidence on his clothing included industrial solvents used at Hawthorne Manufacturing. The killer likely assumed the outhouse was still in use, Grayson theorized, that the body would be obscured by waste or eventually removed when the pit was serviced. Further investigation revealed the Whitaker property had been purchased through a shell company called Maple Investments LLC just 2 months after Robert's disappearance. The paperwork trail led to a lawyer in the county seat who refused to divulge his client's identity, citing attorney-client privilege. The media descended on Maple Grove, national outlets picking up the story of the accountant whose remains were found in an outhouse 5 years after his mysterious disappearance. Linda and the children retreated from the spotlight, but others in town were less reticent. "I always said someone did him in," Doris from the roadside diner told a television reporter. "Nice family man like that doesn't just vanish." Sheriff Grayson worked methodically, piecing together evidence, old and new. The breakthrough came when he discovered the Whitaker property bordered land owned by Victor Townsend, a hunting cabin the factory owner used for business retreats. "The proximity can't be coincidence," Grayson told his newly formed task force. "Townsend or someone working for him could have easily transported the body from the cabin to the outhouse without being seen. What evidence do you think will be crucial to solving this 5-year-old mystery? Share your detective instincts in the comments." Sheriff Grayson sat at his desk, surrounded by case files, evidence photos, and 5 years of accumulated suspicions. The discovery of Robert Harding's body had transformed a missing person case into a homicide investigation, bringing new resources and urgency. "I need your best man on this," he told Captain Marcus from the state police. "This isn't just a murder, It's about corruption that's been poisoning my town for years." Detective Lucas Bennett arrived the next day, a 35-year-old investigator with a reputation for solving cold cases. Tall and lean, with observant gray eyes and a methodical approach, Bennett brought fresh perspective and state-of-the-art forensic techniques. "We should re-examine everything," Bennett suggested during their first strategy session. "Even evidence that seemed insignificant 5 years ago might be crucial now." They started with Robert's pickup truck, which had been impounded after his disappearance and then released to Linda a year later. Stored in her garage under a tarp, it remained largely untouched, a memorial she couldn't bring herself to sell. Using luminol and alternative light sources unavailable in 1975, the forensics team discovered blood traces on the driver's side door handle and smudged fingerprints that didn't match Robert's. "We've got 2 sets of prints here," the technician explained. "Robert's, of course, but also these partials that match neither him nor Linda." "Run them through the system," Bennett ordered, "and check for matches with Townsend and anyone connected to him." Meanwhile, Grayson interviewed retired factory workers who now felt emboldened to speak. Many had been silent during the initial investigation, fearing for their jobs in a town where Hawthorne Manufacturing was the primary employer. "Townsend ran that place like his personal kingdom," explained Henry Morris, a former line supervisor. "Nobody questioned anything if they wanted to keep working." Frank Weber had continued his private investigation even after being fired. When Grayson and Bennett approached him at his new job as head maintenance man at the high school, he was ready. "I've been waiting for this day," Frank said, leading them to his garage where a wall was covered with newspaper clippings, notes, and strings connecting various events. "After Bob disappeared, I started tracking all the shipments that didn't match the manifests. Always to the same 3 destinations, always reported as equipment parts, but weighing much more than they should." "What were they really shipping?" Bennett asked. Frank's expression darkened. "Based on what I overheard from the night shift? Guns? Military-grade weapons that never made it to their official destinations." "That's a serious accusation," Grayson noted. "Bob found the money trail. I found the physical evidence. Between us, we could have brought down Townsend's whole operation." "Then why didn't you come forward sooner?" Frank's shoulders slumped. "After what happened to Bob." "After I lost my job? I've got 3 kids, Sheriff. I was scared." The mysterious key Linda had found in Robert's tackle box proved to be another crucial piece of the puzzle. After trying numerous banks in neighboring counties, they discovered it fit a safety deposit box at First National in the county seat. Inside, they found exactly what Robert had been protecting: the original ledgers documenting millions diverted from Hawthorne Manufacturing to offshore accounts, along with shipping manifests proving the weapons trafficking Frank had described. "He made copies on microfilm and kept the originals here," Grayson realized. "Smart man, knew he needed insurance." "Insurance that didn't save his life," Bennett observed grimly. The investigation accelerated when Diane Phillips, now Diane Townsend following her marriage to Victor 3 years earlier, contacted the sheriff's office requesting protection in exchange for testimony. "I want immunity," she insisted, nervously twisting her wedding ring. "I didn't know about Robert until afterward, I swear." "Know what about Robert?" Bennett pressed. "That Victor had him killed." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The night Robert disappeared, Victor came home late. His clothes were muddy, his hands scratched. He was drinking heavily, which he never did. When I asked what happened, he said business problem solved, and told me never to ask again." "And you married him anyway?" Grayson couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. Diane's face hardened. "You don't know what it's like being alone in this town, Sheriff. Victor offered security, position. By the time I realized what I'd aligned myself with, it was too late to get out cleanly." "But now you're talking. Why?" "Because I found these." She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photographs of Victor meeting with known organized crime figures from Chicago. He's planning something bigger, something that will hurt a lot of people, and because, her voice caught, because I can't live with Robert's ghost anymore. While the adults pursued official channels, Caroline Harding launched her own investigation. At 15, she possessed her father's sharp mind and attention to detail. She befriended Amanda Townsend, Victor's daughter from his first marriage, who attended the same high school. "My dad wasn't perfect," Amanda confided during a study session at the library, "but he changed after your dad disappeared. Became paranoid, controlling, started keeping everything locked, even inside our house." "Like what?" Caroline asked casually, hiding her intense interest. "His office, for one, has this wall safe behind a painting? So cliché. I've seen him open it when he thinks no one's around. He uses my mom's birthday for the combination, 5231. Caroline relayed this information to Grayson, who obtained a warrant to search Townsend's home. With Amanda's cooperation, she'd grown increasingly disturbed by her father's activities. They accessed the safe while Townsend was at a political fundraiser. Inside, dusty but unmistakable, was Robert's missing briefcase. The briefcase contained additional ledgers, letters implicating several county officials in the weapons scheme, and most damning, a handwritten note from Townsend to someone named Mercer. "H problem handled. Clean up at WU property complete." The confrontation came during a rare thunderstorm that sent sheets of rain lashing against the windows of the sheriff's office. Victor Townsend arrived in response to what he believed was a routine follow-up about the reopened investigation. Instead, he found Sheriff Grayson, Detective Bennett, and District Attorney Harlow waiting with a thick file of evidence. "Victor Townsend," Grayson began formally, "we'd like to ask you some questions about the murder of Robert Harding." Townsend's expression remained impassive. "I've already told you everything I know, which is nothing. Robert's death is a tragedy, but I fail to see how it involves me." "Then perhaps you can explain these," Bennett said, sliding the offshore account records across the table. "Or these." The shipping manifests followed. "Or this." Finally, the photograph of Robert's briefcase in Townsend's safe. Color drained from Townsend's face, but he maintained composure. "These could be fabricated. I want my lawyer." "Your lawyer can meet us at the station," Grayson replied. "Victor Townsend, you're under arrest for the murder of Robert Harding and conspiracy to commit fraud and weapons trafficking." "You're making a mistake," Townsend hissed as Grayson recited his rights. "I have friends in this county. This won't stick." "Your friends are being arrested as we speak," D.A. Harlow informed him coldly, "including Thomas Mercer, who I believe helped you dispose of Robert's body." The interrogation lasted through the night. As evidence mounted and his accomplices began cooperating to save themselves, Townsend's resolve gradually crumbled. When confronted with Diane's testimony and the mounting physical evidence, he finally broke. He was going to ruin everything, Townsend admitted, his voice hollow. Years of building relationships, creating channels. He wouldn't listen to reason. "So you killed him?" Bennett pressed. "I didn't mean to, just wanted to scare him, make him see reason. Mercer hit him too hard." Townsend's eyes looked distant. After that, there was no going back. Thomas Mercer, Townsend's fixer, corroborated the account in exchange for a reduced sentence. He described striking Robert from behind, then helping transport the body to Townsend's hunting cabin where they determined the best disposal method. "The outhouse was Townsend's idea," Mercer testified, said it was poetic justice for a man who was full of crap about business ethics. The evidence from Robert's truck and briefcase, combined with the testimonies of Diane and Mercer, left no room for reasonable doubt. Due to the age of the crime and some evidence degradation, prosecutors accepted a manslaughter plea rather than risk trial on first-degree murder charges. Townsend received 15 years, a sentence many in Maple Grove found insufficient for the pain he had caused, but at least some measure of justice had been served. If this story has kept you entertained, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more mysteries. Do you think justice is still possible after 5 years? On a crisp autumn day in 1980, almost exactly 5 years after he vanished, Robert Harding was laid to rest properly in Maple Grove Cemetery. The community turned out en masse, many bringing food to the Harding home afterward in a belated show of the support that had waned during the years of uncertainty. Linda stood at the graveside, flanked by Caroline and Nathan, their faces solemn but peaceful for the first time in years. The simple headstone read, Robert James Harding, 1938 to 1975, beloved husband and father. The truth cannot remain buried. He can rest now, Linda whispered, as the last mourners departed. And so can we. The resolution brought changes to the Harding family. Linda used the insurance money, finally released after the confirmation of Robert's death, to enroll in community college, pursuing the teaching degree she had abandoned when she married young. Caroline, inspired by her father's meticulous financial detective work, eventually studied accounting with a focus on fraud investigation. Her quiet determination to follow in her father's footsteps became a tribute more lasting than any monument. Nathan's path proved more difficult. His anger, so long directed at his absent father, now needed a new focus. With counseling and the structure of athletic programs, he gradually channeled his intensity into more constructive outlets. Though the scars of his childhood loss would never fully heal, he found purpose in protecting others as a volunteer firefighter. Sheriff Walt Grayson retired the following spring, the Harding case having taken a personal toll he rarely acknowledged. At his retirement dinner, he confessed to Linda, "In all my years with a badge, no case ever haunted me like Robert's. I just wish we'd found him sooner." "You never gave up," she replied, squeezing his hand. "That's what matters." The final twist in the story came 6 months after Townsend's conviction. Detective Bennett, now working major crimes for the state police, visited Mercer in prison. "There's still something that doesn't add up," Bennett told the former fixer across the visitation room table. "Townsend wasn't physically strong enough to help you move a body. Who else was involved?" Mercer's eyes darted to the guard, then back to Bennett. "Some questions are better left unanswered, Detective. Townsend's going away for a long time. Let it rest." Was it someone still in Maple Grove? Someone who never paid for their part? Mercer leaned forward. "Maple Grove has always had secrets, Detective. Some go back generations." Robert stumbled into something bigger than embezzlement, bigger than guns. You start pulling on that thread, no telling what might unravel. Bennett pressed further, but Mercer refused to elaborate. The detective left with the unsettling certainty that justice, while partially served, remained incomplete. Years later, the Whitaker property was finally developed, the subdivision rising where the old farmhouse and outbuildings had stood. Nothing marked the spot where the outhouse had once concealed its grim secret, just a small park with benches facing a man-made pond. Occasionally, longtime residents would pass by and remember. Some would pause, reflecting on how a community had been forever changed by greed, corruption, and one man's fateful decision to stand for what was right. In the end, Robert Harding's legacy wasn't just the tragic circumstances of his death, but the ripples of truth that eventually exposed the darkness beneath Maple Grove's placid surface. His children grew up forever marked by his absence, yet also inspired by his courage. His wife found strength she never knew she possessed. And a town learned that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, eventually find their way into the light. Some secrets stay buried long after the truth comes to light. This has been Last Seen Stories. What do you think was the most shocking twist in Robert Harding's case? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries that will keep you up at night. Do you think justice is still possible after 5 years? On a crisp autumn day in 1980, almost exactly 5 years after he vanished, Robert Harding was laid to rest properly in Maple Grove Cemetery. The community turned out en masse, many bringing food to the Harding home afterward in a belated show of the support that had waned during the years of uncertainty. Linda stood at the graveside, flanked by Caroline and Nathan, their faces solemn but peaceful for the first time in years. The simple headstone read, Robert James Harding, 1938 to 1975, beloved husband and father. The truth cannot remain buried. He can rest now, Linda whispered, as the last mourners departed. And so can we. The resolution brought changes to the Harding family. Linda used the insurance money, finally released after the confirmation of Robert's death, to enroll in community college, pursuing the teaching degree she had abandoned when she married young. Caroline, inspired by her father's meticulous financial detective work, eventually studied accounting with a focus on fraud investigation. Her quiet determination to follow in her father's footsteps became a tribute more lasting than any monument. Nathan's path proved more difficult. His anger, so long directed at his absent father, now needed a new focus. With counseling and the structure of athletic programs, he gradually channeled his intensity into more constructive outlets. Though the scars of his childhood loss would never fully heal, he found purpose in protecting others as a volunteer firefighter. Sheriff Walt Grayson retired the following spring, the Harding case having taken a personal toll he rarely acknowledged. At his retirement dinner, he confessed to Linda, "In all my years with a badge, no case ever haunted me like Robert's. I just wish we'd found him sooner." "You never gave up," she replied, squeezing his hand. "That's what matters." The final twist in the story came 6 months after Townsend's conviction. Detective Bennett, now working major crimes for the state police, visited Mercer in prison. "There's still something that doesn't add up," Bennett told the former fixer across the visitation room table. "Townsend wasn't physically strong enough to help you move a body. Who else was involved?" Mercer's eyes darted to the guard, then back to Bennett. "Some questions are better left unanswered, Detective. Townsend's going away for a long time. Let it rest." Was it someone still in Maple Grove? Someone who never paid for their part? Mercer leaned forward. "Maple Grove has always had secrets, Detective. Some go back generations." Robert stumbled into something bigger than embezzlement, bigger than guns. You start pulling on that thread, no telling what might unravel. Bennett pressed further, but Mercer refused to elaborate. The detective left with the unsettling certainty that justice, while partially served, remained incomplete. Years later, the Whitaker property was finally developed, the subdivision rising where the old farmhouse and outbuildings had stood. Nothing marked the spot where the outhouse had once concealed its grim secret, just a small park with benches facing a man-made pond. Occasionally, longtime residents would pass by and remember. Some would pause, reflecting on how a community had been forever changed by greed, corruption, and one man's fateful decision to stand for what was right. In the end, Robert Harding's legacy wasn't just the tragic circumstances of his death, but the ripples of truth that eventually exposed the darkness beneath Maple Grove's placid surface. His children grew up forever marked by his absence, yet also inspired by his courage. His wife found strength she never knew she possessed. And a town learned that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, eventually find their way into the light. Some secrets stay buried long after the truth comes to light. This has been Last Seen Stories. What do you think was the most shocking twist in Robert Harding's case? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries that will keep you up at night.